Hello, welcome back to Miss Clark Reads To You. This is the second part of the love letter by Jack Finney. And we are going to read the love letter that was found in the secret drawer of the desk, dated May 14th, 1882. So I added to our rising action. He spends time with his desk and he finds the love letter. I've added to the setting May 4th, 1882, the old love letter, because if he reads it in his mind, he's going to go back into 1882. And we determined that he was a narrator, a male bachelor, 24, with a deep desire to find deep love. And then just so you know, when we're looking at the plot are the main events, this rising action, this climax, and this falling action. So because I don't have a lot of space, the rest of my rising action will come in bullet points right there. Dearest, Papa, Mama, Willie, and Cook are long retired and to sleep. Now the night fire advanced, the house silent, I alone remain awake, at last free to speak to you as I choose. Yes, I am willing to say it, heart of mine, I crave your bold glance. I long for the tender warmth of your look, and I welcome your ardency, and I prize it. For what else should these be? Taken, but sweet tribute to me. I smiled a little. It was hard to believe that people had once expressed themselves in elaborate phrasings of this kind. But they had. The letter continued, and I wondered why it had never been sent. Dear one, do not ever change your ways. Never address me other than with what consideration my utterances should deserve. If I be foolish and whimsical, deride me sweetly, if you will. But if I speak with seriousness, respond always with what care you deem my thoughts worthy. For, oh, my beloved, I am sick to death of the indulgent smile and tolerant glance with which a woman's fancies are met, as I am repelled by the false gentleness and nicety of manner which too often ill conceal the wantonness they attempt to mask. I speak of the man I am to marry. Oh, if you could but save me from that. So clearly, this man that she's to marry, she says, I am sick of the death-indulgent smile. So she can tell that his smile is fake. It produces death in her. She knows he doesn't really love her. She doesn't really love him. But remember, this is 1882. And I'm sure she's betrothed to marry him. I'm sure it's an arranged marriage. And we've talked about arranged marriages briefly in the class to know that she has no choice. But you cannot. You are everything I prize, warmly, honestly, ardent, respectful in heart as well as in manner, true and loving. You are as I wish you to be. For you exist only in my mind. But figment though you are, and though I shall never see your like, you are more dear to me than he who I am betrothed. I think of you constantly. I dream of you. I speak with you in my mind and in my heart. Oh, would you existed outside them. Sweetheart, good night. Dream of me too. With all my love, I am your Helen. So what I love about this is she's written this to a figment, a make-believe, a made-up man that she imagines she would be deeply in love with, that they would have that, that exchange of emotion, that deep emotion. And instantly now you know, because we've analyzed him, he has something in common with this letter writer. At the bottom of the page, as I'm sure she'd been taught in school, was written Miss Helen Elizabeth Worley, Brooklyn, New York, and as I stared down at it now, I was no longer smiling at this cry from the heart in the middle of a night long ago. The night is a strange time when you're alone in it, the rest of your world asleep. If I'd found that letter in the daytime, I'd have smiled and shown it to a few friends and forgotten it, but alone here now, a window partly open and a cool late night freshness stirring in the air. Look at this descriptive writing, this sensory detail. It's night, it's dark, the wind is coming in through the open window. It was impossible to think of the girl who had written the letter as a very old lady or maybe even long since dead. And as I read her words, she seemed real and alive to me, sitting, or so I pictured her, pen in hand at this desk in a long white old-fashioned dress, her young hair piled on top of her head in the dead of a night like this, here in Brooklyn, almost in sight of where I sit now. And my heart went out to her as I stared down at her secret, hopeless appeal against the world and time she lived in. So if we fast forward into where the narrator is, those expectations of betrothal, of arranged marriage are no longer in place. So I've done a little bit of research. So I know this story would take place from perhaps the late 60s, the early 70s, modernized time. Women's liberation has come into a movement, and arranged marriages were more of a thing of the past. Now he's going to talk to us again, the narrator. I'm trying to explain why I answered. Yes, why I answered that letter. There in the silence of a timeless spring night, it seemed natural enough to uncork that bottle, pick up the pen beside it, and then, spreading a sheet of yellowing old notepaper on the desk, to begin to write. I felt I was communicating with a still living young woman when I wrote. Helen, I have just read the letter in the secret drawer of your desk, and I wish I knew how I could possibly help you. I can't tell you what you might think of me if I were there, a way I could reach you. But you are someone I am certain I would like to know, and I hope you are beautiful, but you needn't be. You're a girl I could like, and maybe ardently or deeply. And if I promise you, I would be true and loving. Do the best you can, Helen Elizabeth Worley, in the time and place you are. I can't reach you or help you, but I'll think of you, and maybe I'll dream of you, too. Yours, Jake Belknap. Woohoo! We have some characters' names. We have Jake and we have Helen Elizabeth Worley. I was grinning a little sheepishly as I signed my name, knowing I'd read through what I'd written, then crumple the old sheet and throw it away. But I was glad I'd written it, and I didn't throw it away. I was still caught in the feeling of the warm, silent night, and it suddenly seemed to me that throwing my letter away would turn the writing of it into a meaningless and foolish thing, though maybe what I did seems more foolish still. I folded the paper, and I put it into one of the envelopes, and I sealed it. And I dipped the pen into the old ink, and I wrote, Miss Helen Worley, on the front of the envelope. I suppose this can't be explained. You'd have to have been where I was and felt as I did to understand it, but I wanted to mail that letter. I simply quit examining my feelings, and I quit trying to be rational, and I was suddenly determined to complete what I'd begun, just as far as I was able to go. So, reads letter, writes back. Jake and Helen Elizabeth Worley. And I think his conflict is he's trying to make sense of what he did. He's trying to rationalize to us what he did. And we don't really know what he's done yet. Rationalize to reader actions. You know, we saw this happen when we read the Telltale Heart. There's something about rationalization. There's something about being reasonable. There's something about sometimes we do things and we can't explain them, but then we try to. And so this is what this story is about. Because it's going to have an end result, here's the suspense, that is not rational. My parents sold their home in New Jersey when my father retired 2 years ago, and now they live in Florida and enjoy it. And when my mother cleared out the old house I grew up in, she packed up and mailed a huge package of useless things I was glad to have. There were class photos, dating from grammar school through college, old books I read as a kid, Boy Scout pins, a mass of junk of that sort, including a stamp collection I had in grade school. Now, I found these things in my hall closet shelf in the box they'd come in, and I found my old stamp album. It's funny how things can stick in your mind over the years. Standing at the open closet door, I turned the pages of that beat up old album directly to the stamps I remembered buying from another kid with 75 cents I'd earned cutting grass. And there they lay, lightly fastened to the page with a little gummed paper hinge, a pair of two mint condition 2-cent United States stamps issued in 1869. And standing there in the hallway looking down at them, I once again got something of the thrill I'd had as a kid when I acquired them. It's a handsome stamp, square in shape with an ornate border and a tiny engraving in the center, a rider on a galloping post horse. And for all I knew, they might have been worth a fair amount of money by now, especially an unseparated pair of two stamps. But back at the desk, I pulled one of them loose and, tearing it carefully through the perforation, I licked the back and fastened it to the faintly yellowing envelope. I thought no further than that. By now, I suppose I was almost in kind of a trance. I shoved the old ink bottle and pen into the hip pocket and picked up my letter and walked out of my apartment. Brock Place, 3 blocks away, was deserted when I reached it. The parked cars motionless at the curbs, the high, late moonlight softening the lines of the big concrete block supermarket at the corner. Then, as I walked on, my letter in my hand, there stood the old house, just past a little shoe repair shop. It stood far back from the broken cast-iron fence in the center of its wide, weed-grown lot, blacketched in the moonlight. And I stopped on the walk, and I stood staring up at it. The high-windowed old roof was gone, and the interior nearly gutted, the yard strewn with splintered boards and great chunks of torn plaster. The windows and doors were all removed, and the openings hollow in the clear wash of light. But the high old walls, last of all to go, still stood tall and dignified in their old-fashioned strength and outmoded charm. So if you haven't made a connection yet, what you should realize is this is Helen Worley's house that she lived in, where she had the desk. And he's walked over to the house to find out the number of the house. And the house is in disrepair. It's not lived in. Then I walked through the opening where a gate had once hung, up the cracked and weed-grown brick pavement, toward the wide old porch, and there on one of the ornate fluted posts I saw the house number deeply and elaborately carved into the old wood, and the wide flat porch railing leading down to the walk. And I brought out my ink and pen and copied the number carefully onto my envelope. 972, I printed under the name of the girl who once lived there, Brock Place, Brooklyn, New York. And then I turned toward the street again with my envelope in hand. All right. So, we have some more rising action. He is going to the house to get the number, and let's see where he goes next. So that's part 3. Looking forward to come back and see where he's headed with his stamped and addressed envelope to Miss Helen Elizabeth Worley. I look forward to part 3, and we should be able to finish it up in the 3rd video.